To say that your career in music has been illustrious would be an understatement. It's been quite a journey, and some of the people that you've played with are not only some of my favorite artists, but also household names in the genre that we know as heavy metal. Could you just give us a brief overview, as best as you can, of your career so far as a musician and some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, well, James, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
For starters, this is super cool. You know, every day I wake up and thank the gods of rock and roll to have been blessed with the opportunity to uh, play heavy metal and be in the heavy metal rock and roll business. It's pretty remarkable. And what I mean by that is that I technically started in the business in 1985, and my first band that I was in, and keep in mind, 1985, I was 15 years old. But in 1985, my first real band got a record deal, like why the majority of us were in high school. So,
Wow.
so, so 1986, we put out our first record, and then we followed that up with a record every year. So 1986, 87, 88. So by the time I graduated high school, I had already put out 3 records and kind of been on tour and done that whole thing, and signed by a real record label, Metal Blade Records, which is, you know, the first place that you ever heard Metallica and Slayer, right? So this isn't some chumpy label. But the point of it is that in 1985, heavy metal was not a career choice. You know, we did it because we loved it and we were having fun, but in no way did we think like, oh, this is going to be our future, you know? So it's interesting how things then kind of transpired over time where, you know, I graduated in 1988, and I was kind of really the only one that aggressively pursued a career in music. The other guys kind of peeled off and went to college and got married and did that whole thing. You know, because we had to move out of our parents' house and, you know, become responsible adults. But I continued to be an irresponsible adult and chase the dream of being a rock and roller, rock star, heavy metal guy. And it's pretty wild that it kind of ended up the way that it did, to where, you know, here we are chatting, and I just turned 56 years old. So I've been chasing this thing for that long. And in some ways it all kind of ended up, you know,
Yeah.
it sort of miraculously sort of worked out. And it continues to work itself out. So it's pretty remarkable, you know?
Yeah. So especially at that time in the mid 80s, late 80s in Los Angeles, what was the scene like in terms of heavy metal and music? Because I know that you've got, on one hand, glam metal and Motley Crue were huge kind of mainstream bands, and then you've got the heavier kind of thrash metal that's perhaps more underground but about to go very mainstream as well. What was it like just being a fan of that music and playing, you know, the clubs on Sunset Strip and doing the tours?
So we were definitely part of that thrash metal scene that you know, you're talking about. That was that, especially because we were based in Santa Monica, Los Angeles area, and Metallica wasn't too far away up north, and then Slayer wasn't too far away, just kind of on the outskirts of Los Angeles. So the Los Angeles blossoming underground thrash heavy metal underworld was happening sort of right underneath like our feet. And then we also had things like Black Flag, that even though they broke up in 1986 and they weren't a heavy metal band, they still kind of carved the way for independent heavy music. And they were kind of one of the first real bands like in our vicinity that had their own record label, put out their own records, booked their own tours, went out there, a real sort of DIY approach, and highly influential when it comes to how you think of, say, a rock band with a very distinguished frontman and then a very distinguished kind of name and logo and all of that. And so they really kind of helped kind of pave the way for that. But the glam metal thing, you know, the hair metal thing was happening sort of simultaneously, but you know, we wanted nothing to do with that. Like Metallica's first record was called Kill 'Em All, which meant kill all the posers, right? Which was like so funny to kind of think about now. But yeah, the big hair and the cowboy boots and the sequin trench coats and stuff like that, that wasn't our scene. You know, we were very much more like underground and heavy, and like you can't, and it was funny to look back at it in hindsight, but from a credible standpoint, you couldn't even get anywhere near that stuff, right? Like it's like even like a Led Zeppelin record was somewhat questionable, or like a Van Halen record. Like you couldn't even really have that if you wanted to be taken kind of seriously in this like elitist underground heavy metal world. But you know what's interesting? I don't talk about this very much, but man, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit, and we as a band were already kind of done at this point, but the glam thing was so massive. And when you think about sort of the what was on MTV at the time, which was really, it was like you had terrestrial radio and MTV, and those were that is where you saw and heard music. And it was kind of like Madonna, Michael Jackson, Def Leppard, and Motley Crue. Like that was what it was. There wasn't a whole lot in between. There was a lot of one hit wonder, like 80s new wave stuff or whatever. But like Quiet Riot was like massive because of MTV, and Def Leppard and all these bands were massive because of MTV. And so it really kind of didn't feel like that was going to go anywhere anytime soon, you know? And then fast forward a couple of years, and we had, after the band broke up in '88 and we all moved on, I eventually moved into Hollywood to kind of pursue, you know, the career, because that was the hot spot. That's where things were happening. And for fun, we'd drive down the strip or go hang out with all the, you know, hair metal contingent, you know, on the weekends. And it was like, it was a stretch of Sunset Boulevard that went from Gazzari's on the far end down to the Whiskey. And then that whole strip with the Rainbow and the Roxy and everything in between. It was just jam packed with guys promoting their bands and girls and just people spilling out into the streets. It was like a scene. And I distinctly remember it was like whenever 90, 91, whenever it came out, but Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nirvana came out, and it was like the weekend before that the strip was as abundant and crowded and crawling as usual. And then a weekend or two after Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, it was a ghost town. It was over. Like that song literally wiped out that whole scene of people. And it was kind of wild to see the power of music. And, you know, it just kind of felt like a changing of the guard, right? Like that cowboy boots and sequin trench coats were out, and this is over, and flannel shirts and combat boots are in, and get down with the program now. And it was a wild thing to see. I've never seen anything like it. But anyway, that was kind of my experience sort of in that time. And then that is whenever I kind of started to change my tune of trying to make it in my own band, versus I woke up one day and had this idea of like, man, this is really tough. I should probably think about getting in a band that's already successful, that's already famous, that already has hit songs, right? That is already doing things to kind of skip the line, if you will. And so that's one thing to make that type of decision. But then it just kind of started happening. And then that's whenever I started to become this hired gun character. And, you know, then things kind of escalated from there.
In a lot of bands, and you will have been around these bands and in these bands where there's a very charismatic frontman that's clearly the leader of the band. Or sometimes it's not the frontman, sometimes it's the guitar player, and he's holding down the fort, and the other members might come and go, but he is the guy, it's his band. What do you think it is that separates those guys, whether it's a Dave Mustaine or an Ozzy or somebody else, from the guys that are more the hired guns, or they play the drums for 10 years, but they're not at the forefront necessarily of the publicity?
I was thinking about this the other day, and but the quick answer to your question is there's some sense of just ignorance is bliss, right? On one hand, like on the other hand, it's just this is my only option. Like this is the only way that this is happening, right? Like, cause I ask people this, like, what would Axl Rose be doing if he wasn't Axl Rose? Like, would that guy be working at like a Home Depot, and would he show up late to his gig at the Home Depot and that be an acceptable, like, you know what I mean? Like, is Axl Rose because he's famous, or would he have just been that character no matter what it is that he ended up in life? But part of you, whenever you look at it, you're like, there's no way that guy wouldn't be a humongous rock star. Like, that is just what the universe had in store for that guy. But anyway, back to the point of, at some point early on, Ozzy, whose name was John Osborne, was so confident that he tattooed his nickname on his own knuckles. Like, James, like you and I wouldn't tattoo our name on our knuckles or any, like, it seems like such an insane idea but that level of overconfidence, I think, like, spreads some kind of energy into the world to where you're just like, of course he became that guy, because there was just this level of confidence that suggests there is no other way that this is happening,
Yeah.
And
I think when you combine that with genuine talents, that's when you have somebody special. I'm sure you met a lot of people. I remember watching that documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization.
Mm-hmm.
And in that documentary, they interview a bunch of kind of B-rate club bands, and the frontmen, they all say, like, I'm going to make it. Like, there's no way I don't make it. And then you look at what happened to a lot of them, and they died off. Did you meet a lot of people like that, either in hindsight or at the time you thought, this guy is kind of delusional, his band really isn't that good?
I've met all those exact people from that movie after the fact. And yes, spoiler alert, they didn't make it, but what else are you going to say? I mean, you kind of have to be delusional, right? You kind of, like, for something like being a rock star, it's like there is some level of delusion that you have to kind of believe in to want to that be your career. But I met all those, I've run into all of those people in that movie, and it's and it's pretty wild. So sorry, what was the question? I sort of lost.
That was really, you answered it really. I was just wondering if, how many of those people you did actually meet, either at the time or looking back. But for you, it seems to me like that must have been such an insane time. And people's lifestyles were pretty extreme and insane. To me, you seem like somebody that's very level-headed, and I know that you're very into, improving yourself, whether that's mentally or physically. Was that always a part of you? Do you think you always had that kind of head screwed on attitude that was a bit different from other people in the scene?
To get where I am, which is nowhere extravagant, right? Like, I'm not an Ozzy Osborne, like I joke, like, people are like, oh, what's it feel like to be a rock star? And I was like, well, let's be totally clear. Like, I'm not a rock star. Like, I'm rock star adjacent. Like, I'm very fortunate to be able to be a part of actual rock stars and be able to contribute to them spreading the message of their music, right? But I don't get up every day and and am afforded the luxury of going like, I'm Rob Zombie. Like, like I wake up every day and I have to get up early and grind and hustle and, cause I've built my own business, my own personal brand. I run my own companies and do all of that. But like playing in a band at this point is just something for fun that I do on the side, but in no way do I wake up every day and be like, oh, hoo, my ego is so flexed that like I'm a rock star. That is not how I operate in daily life. I do not have that luxury. But it's fascinating to have had a career of being around those guys and seeing what they do and how they operate, it's pretty wild. It's a pretty wild adventure. And to have lived through the 80s, yes, like I said, whenever we graduated high school, I was very singular focused on being in a band, being in a successful band, having the energy of music be around me and being the thing that is my career. And I really kind of didn't see it any other way, even though I had day jobs and crappy stuff you had to do to pay the rent and stuff, like just like anybody else. Like whenever my career kind of really started to kick off, I had two jobs. Like I worked during the day, at a used clothing store or like a retail, like a retailer. And then at night I worked at a bar as a barback and bartender. So I was literally going from one job to the next. And, but nowhere in that did I think that my career was going to be in retail or in serving drinks. Like that was like, this is a means to an end. I have to do this right now and I will put in the grind and I will hustle. But, any free time that I had was always kind of focused on what my goal was and putting in the work to reach that goal, which, eventually I did. But, the point of it is you got to kind of do what you got to do along the way. But I did still have an insane, unreasonable point of view that I was going to be something bigger than what currently I was doing, if that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. And I think it's important, whatever you're trying to achieve, that you hang on to that and you see that it's part of the journey. It's not just your destination. I mean, I've done some crappy jobs too. I actually worked at a hot dog stand when I was younger. So I would be serving hot dogs and then come home smelling of hot dogs. Mm-hmm. But at no point did I allow that to become my identity. It's just something I'm doing to pay for food, to help myself get through university. And then my identity was always something different, something that was much grander, to be honest.
Yeah.
So for your high school band breaks up. You're late teens, early 20s at this point. Grunge is kind of taking over, killing off the scene as you knew it. How do you go from there to eventually joining Ozzy's band? How long was that journey, and what were some of the big steps that happened along the way?
Yeah, so it started with the decision of I no longer want to be in my own band and try and make it that way. I would rather be a hired gun that gets hired to play in a band that is already successful. That was the frame of mind, right? That was the position. And that's what eventually kind of started to happen. So, I got hired to be in this band, and that was the first time. This band was called Prong, and they had kind of a hit song. They were like mid-level, but they were there. They were doing big tours and they were like, that was the first time that I had experienced what being in a real band was like. And we had a tour bus and we went to Japan and toured Japan, and we went to Europe and played all the big festivals, and we toured the US, and it was like we were headlining. It was like, and we had a hit song, right? Like the song that you play at the end was the song that people knew. And that was like wild to experience that energy. And that was kind of where it started. And that thing lasted for a minute. And then it just kind of started to roll into other opportunities. And look, I'm very fortunate because like, I know a lot of hired gun musicians that even though they're getting paid to play music, they're playing music that they hate. And I've been very fortunate that all of the things that I have been hired to play in was like Prong, Danzig, um, uh, Rob Zombie, Ozzy Osborne, back to Rob Zombie. You know, it's like these are all tremendously huge individuals, right? And to be the hired gun bass player to dudes whose name is the name of the band that came from another, you know, band or whatever, to be that guy, right? like,
Mhm.
like I'm pretty fortunate to have had that kind of journey. And if I pull anything out of it, I think that maybe there's something relatable here to where it's like, what's that book? Talent is overrated. Where it's like, I have these opportunities, not because I'm talented in a technical shredder sense, right? But because I'm talented in terms of being someone that other people like to be around. Because the secret here is that it's not about the hour on stage. It's about the 23 hours off stage. And can
Mm.
I tolerate this person for 23 hours is more important than, is this person good enough to be on my stage? Right. And if
Mm.
you're good enough for the 23 hours, or you're even exceptional at the 23 hours, then you're good enough to be on my stage, if that makes any sense. And so,
Absolutely.
so a lot of people will spend time really trying to perfect the 1 hour, and that are really bad at the 23 hours. And those types of people don't get the same types of opportunities, because it's like, man,
That's so interesting. Mm.
I don't want to be sequestered with this dude for weeks at a time. Like, it's too painful. no,
Yeah.
no matter how good they are, you know, and that's an interesting sort of peel back look under the hood that most people would not understand how it works, right? Like, it's interesting, the distinction between, say, an athlete versus a musician, or like even actor, like, and
Mhm.
entertainment versus athleticism, right? In
Yes.
From an athletic standpoint of view, the most talented people are the most successful people. In entertainment, the most successful people are not the most technically talented people. you know.
Mm. Yeah, that's so true. It's a big variety of skills, really, and
Mm.
people skills is a big one of them. I got so many questions here. Let me think where I want to take this first. Let's say, well, to make this a little bit more like real for somebody as well. Let's say Ozzy was looking for a new guitar player. How many guitar players do you think there are that would be, just in the world that would be of that standard to be even worth an audition or to be considering anything other than their pure playing? I mean, how competitive are we talking? Are we talking a few hundred, or are we talking more than that, do you reckon?
It probably whittles down to very few. Um, because there's so much it's such a tremendous um size of shoes and amount of shoes that you have to fit into. So when I think when Zach got the gig with Ozzy in, like, it was like late 80s, 88, 89, and he was like a teenager, 18, 19 years
Mm.
old when he got that gig, he had to step into the shoes of Tony Iommi, Randy Rhoads, and Jakey Lee. Like, those were all the songs that he had to play. And he was 18, 19 years old. Could you think of how talented you were at anything at 18, 19 years old? Not that talented, right? So
Yeah.
he was a one of a kind that was able to not only be the 1 hour guy plus the 23 hours a day guy. He had to step in from a talent perspective into a pretty sizable amount of talent that you have to maneuver around, because these are all very distinctly different types of players. And then you had to get on stage with Ozzy. Therefore, you had to be a showman, right?
Yeah.
You can't just get up there and technically play the stuff. You have to get up there and be late 80s era Ozzy showmanship whilst never missing a beat, right? And like whilst never missing a note. So that was the right guy, the best guy, the perfect guy for the gig. And that was one dude, you know, and I don't, and I wasn't around at that time. I can't say how many people auditioned or sent in tapes or wanted to audition or whatever, but it was probably thousands, right? But for that, it's this collection of this collection of things that have to all be this perfect storm to connect the dots to be that right guy. And that is going to happen 1 in a million times.
What would you say you've observed about players like that, like the Zakk Wyldes, like John Five? Obviously Randy Rhoads passed away, but among those just truly exceptional guitar players or drummers, what have you noticed about their personalities that you think has given them what people would say is like the gift or the talent that they have with their instruments?
I do believe that there is a gift. Like, and I'm not saying it's like an unfair advantage, but there is a gift. And maybe what makes it an unfair advantage is that you discover, because like, you don't know, right? Like, we're here in this world and we don't know what our special talent is. Like, we're drawn to the things that we're attracted to, but are we going to be any good at those, right? Like, let's just say I was a huge basketball fan and I wanted to play basketball my entire life. Dude, I'm 5'7". I'm never going to be, no matter how hard I work at it, I'm never going to be a professional basketball player. Basketball will never pay my bills, right? So I think that there's an innate talent in everyone. I think the distinction that makes it an unfair advantage is the people that uncover their God-given talent early on, right? And I think Zakk is maybe a good example of someone that found his talent at a very young age and was able to develop it at an early age, right? So you get a head start. And I'm not saying that he isn't extremely talented, but he did put in the work, right? He played for like 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And he was very focused on being the best ever. And there also has to be, I think, something to that as well. So yes, I believe that there is a God-given talent aspect of it and that they find it early on and that their passion for this thing enables them to want to elevate themselves and perfect their skill upwards of 8, 12 hours a day, just because it doesn't feel like they're putting in work. It's just like, I just want to do this all day long and I love every aspect of doing it, and so I feel like that's the thing that I kind of pull away, is that you don't have to be the best at it, but there certainly has to be a passion for it. Otherwise it's just going to feel like work. And then what fun is that?
Yeah. A lot of people that have a creative passion, in order to make a living from it, or maybe to not have to attend bar or work in the clothing shop, they'll do the wedding gigs. They'll join a band that maybe they don't like, but at least they're still playing. How come you decided that you weren't going to do that? And do you think that decision to stick with the music that you love was actually one of the best decisions that you made?
It was the only decision that I could have made. Granted, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have played in Madonna's band if it was offered to me. Maybe I would have. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how important playing music of any kind versus playing the kind of music that I wanted to play. Right. I never had that opportunity. But it was just a very strategic decision. Like, playing bass was a very strategic decision. In my orbit at the time, there was a lot of drummers. Like, everyone wanted to be a drummer, right? Everyone wanted to bang on stuff or whatever. And then everyone wanted to be a guitar player, right? It was a thing that you kind of get, and like whenever you're a kid, it's like learn piano or learn guitar. And then there was some distinct individuals that had just the personality trait of being a singer. So for me, I just wanted to be in a band. And to me, what I thought was the quickest pathway into being in a band was to play bass, because there wasn't a lot of people that wanted to be bass players for whatever reason. And so, because I initially wanted to play drums like everybody else. And then I was like, well, it's going to be tough for me to get in a band being a drummer. Plus you got all the stuff, you got, and
it's a pain.
It's a total pain to just the maintenance of it all. And so I brought my drum set to the music store, traded it in for a bass and an amp, and took lessons and started learning and doing that, playing along the songs. But that very first gig that I got was very specifically that this band was looking for a bass player. There wasn't a lot of bass players around, and that's how it started. And then consequently, following that, every gig that I got was because someone was looking for a bass player. And because there just is so very few, at least that are available and cool and good at least good enough for the 1 hour and pretty good for the 23 hours, So yeah. It was all for me, James. It was all very strategic, right? Like I want to get in a band. That is priority number one. How do I get in a band? Be a bass player, because there's not a lot of bass players. Boom, in a band. And then it was like this trying to be in a successful band of my own is very taxing. There's a lot that goes into it. And I feel like there's like a lot of luck and, a lot of uncertainty from there. Now, granted, the reward is greater, but how much time in the world, do I have? Like, I just want to be touring. I just want to be in a band. I want to be doing stuff. I want to be playing songs. I want to feel that energy from the crowd. Right. And so I made this decision of like, I'm just going to be a hired gun guy. I just want to play in bands that are already successful. I made that decision, and luckily it just started to kind of fall into place, and over and over and over again and repeatedly. I can't pull away a lot of that other than at some point when you're in a successful band, whenever another successful band needs a replacement, they look to people that are in successful bands because they have the experience of being on those stages, being in those types of environments or whatever. Now, granted, would there have been someone technically better than me in most of these situations? For sure, 100%. But whenever you're a professional big band and you're looking for someone, you look for the experience. You don't necessarily look for someone that is the best shredder of all time that has no experience, And so I've been fortunate in that way, and that one opportunity kind of parlayed into the next, and it just kind of kept going. And then I feel like the sustainability of that was, like I said, just being a fun guy to be around, and being a professional, showing up on time, knowing the set list, just being a pro, sticking it out, not being a pain in the ass, all of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you observe, especially in kind of the late 80s and the 90s? I'm curious if you think this is less so now, or if it's declined. But to a lot of people, heavy metal, rock music will always make them think of backstage parties, women, drugs, drink. How much would you say that was a part of the scene at the time? And has that faded out over the years? Has professionalism taken over?
There's a funny meme that I have seen, and it's like a sort of split screen meme. And at the top it says, "What people think backstage looks like." And it's like girls with their tops off and dudes just partying, woo, just like bonkers, right? And then it says, "What backstage actually looks like." And it's 4 dudes sitting around with their laptops open, right? Which is 100% accurate. And like for me, like I missed that whole era because whenever I was in a band in the 80s, we were just like a thrash metal band, and that stuff was super uncool. It was like just like that wasn't our scene, right? And then by the time that I got into say Rob Zombie, like that wasn't the scene there either. Like that you know, that was, I mean, sure, you're in a band, but it just wasn't the era. And then by the time that I got into Ozzy, that era was certainly like long gone by then. But, you know, that had a lot to do, I think, if you think of, say, what a backstage was like 60s, 70s, 80s, it had so much to do with just these guys that have this level of success that's sort of undetermined. There was no social media, so no one's going to get caught from cheating on their wives. There was a lot of idle hands in that I'm bored. I'm backstage. People are offering me drugs, right? Like it's like it's an unbelievable state to be in, to where we only work like 1 hour a night and we're just going up there and playing these songs. And then it's just nothing but, you know, elevating the experience from there, right? Because it's like we're celebrating. And what happens when you're celebrating? You break out the party favors, and we're just constantly celebrating and doing crazy stuff and trying to elevate the party to the next level. The music and the energy and the adrenaline wasn't enough, you know? And, but then as social media kind of comes into play, health becomes a priority, right? All these things kind of transpire into where we are today. And, you know, you've got people backstage that are like side hustling, right? And it's like, I play in a band, but I've got work to do, you know, or I'm doing this thing. And like, you know, you see like this generation is like, it was like a, you know, like a, whatever it was, like boomers, millennials, Gen X, like the level of drinking was really high. And then Gen Z drops by like 85%. And so it just has become this thing that just isn't cool anymore. Like the focus is just a completely different place now. And getting fucked up is just like, it's just not a priority. It's not, no one thinks it's cool, you know? And, but yes, backstage is a very different place, these days.
Yeah. When you said, you know, when you joined Rob Zombie and Ozzy, that era was over, do you mean that was over for them because they were of an age where they've been doing it 20 years, or just like that era in the music industry was kind of over?
That era in the music industry was over. It was hanging out a little bit for the people that kind of wanted to, you know, be kind of pretend to be rock stars. But like at the point to where, you know, you're Rob Zombie, it's like, man, you came up in your own band and now you have your own band, and your band is more successful. Like your solo band is more successful than your actual band. And there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that kind of comes along with that. And you didn't get there by luck. It's like you got there because of the focus and strategy, writing good songs, and you gotta keep that ship afloat. And then I feel like, you know, Ozzy kind of, you know, the 80s or whatever, you kind of age, it's just not sustainable, right? Like even like, you know, even like Motley Crue and like, you know, any of those kind of major ragers from the era, it's like, it's not if you're alive today, you don't do, it's not sustainable. You can't still be that guy. Plus it's fucking embarrassing really at this point to be 60, 70 years old and still be that party guy. It's just like, it's embarrassing.
Of course. Yeah, of course. What were some of your early memories with Ozzy? You know, auditioning, doing those first rehearsals, first gigs. Like, what was the main emotion that you were feeling at that time?
You know, I felt it the entire time. Like it just didn't feel real. You know, I grew up, like let's say Blizzard of Oz came out in 80, 81, right? I didn't even play an instrument in 1981. Like holding Blizzard of Oz in your hands and seeing him on the cover and of the album and looking at it, it doesn't even seem like they're real people. It's like they're like these aliens descended upon the earth from planet rock and roll. And, it's like these larger than life characters, right? Like Kiss and AC/DC, Angus Young and Ozzy and Black Sabbath and like all this. It doesn't seem real to a kid that's 11, 12 years old. It just doesn't feel like a real thing. So to have held that record in your hand at a time to where you didn't even play an instrument and didn't even understand that these were like human beings, to fast forward to a moment whenever I was like, I am on stage with this dude playing the songs from this record from before a time that I even played an instrument. Like, it kind of doesn't really make any sense. And so it never made any sense to me. Like, I was very fortunate and very gracious, and they were super, hospitable and nice and generous and supportive, of it all. But man, I gotta be honest, man, it never felt real. Like, you look over and you just be like, I can't believe that I'm playing the song from this record with this dude on this stage in front of 100,000 people right now. This is a little too much to absorb and take in. And it never felt real.
How much did your personal life change as a result of going from being kind of on the club circuit around the Sunset Strip to playing in front of 100,000 people every night with somebody like Ozzy?
I always had the vision that was what was going to happen. This manifest destiny type of thing, where in my mind, I kind of walked around in this delusional haze of that was always going to be my future. That was always what it was. It was always what the destiny was, but when I was young and in clubs and stuff, man, I made some real sacrifices because I saw what would be detrimental to other musicians. Right. And I always kind of thought, like, why even bother spending time to learn the craft if you're just going to get distracted and throw in the towel? Like, I kind of never understood that. It's like, there's so many ways that you could have spent your childhood doing and learning something else. And here, and these are like really talented people that were really good at their craft. And then when it came to it, they just didn't have what it takes. So I looked around and I saw, and, dude, to be totally honest, like, the number one dream killer in this business is a girlfriend.
Okay.
and a girlfriend. I saw very talented people end potential careers way too early because a girl got in their ear, and like, even people that were already in bands that were doing stuff. Like, there was a drummer in a successful band that came on to be a really genre defining band. And I remember, man, like, his girl got in his ear and he ended up quitting that band to have a job at Sears, like a big box retailer. Right. And like, it's just wild to think that you're going to sort of deplete your dreams and aspirations and try and build this fantasy life with someone who doesn't see the world the same way that you do. And you're just trying to appease and do, I guess, quote unquote, do the right thing. But man, like, I just disagree with that mentality. And once again, like, I just saw that in my purview. I saw all these guys peeling off, and I was like, man, that is not going to be me. So case in point was, like, I really made a lot of sacrifices and was like, no girlfriends, I gotta stay on track, no drugs, no drinking, no partying. There's nothing to celebrate here. But like, you just have to remove distractions and keep the focus. And I think that that's a relatable situation in any regard. If you're trying to build like a career or a personal brand or whatever, man, there's always going to be distractions and people trying to pull you out of it that either don't want you to succeed or just don't share your vision. And those are the types of people that you have to distance yourself from, or just make a clean break from, or just extract from your life until you're ready to accept that type of person into your life whenever you're in control and ready. But man, when you're building, you got to remove distractions, whatever they are. I always really hate to be the guy that says you should do something, but from my experience and seeing what I've seen and whatever, like this is one of those moments when I go, man, if you really want this, you really should not have these types of personalities in your life, because it will hinder you, and you will be you will be bummed forever.
How does, let's say a young man is listening to this, he's got a big dream for the future, he's very hardworking and ambitious, and he has a girlfriend in his life. Sometimes the right woman can be an incredible source of support and encouragement.
I agree.
She can actually be really the person that makes him a success, I think, sometimes. What kind of things should he be looking out for? And if he's not sure, if he's starting to think, maybe this girl doesn't support what I want, maybe she isn't rooting for me, maybe she wants me to work at Sears, or whatever the equivalent would be today. Like, what would he listen out for? What are those kind of signs that it's maybe not a good person for him?
Well, you have to trust your instincts, because it's all up to you, right? I mean, James, like you've built your brand and what you've done solely, and I would imagine that there was distractions and things along the way that you had to weed out, and you had to be like, man, I don't want to work at a hot dog stand forever, right? I don't want to chase editorial gigs forever. Like this is not how I envision my future, right? And you made that decision pretty early on. And so I would imagine that there were things in your life that you had to distance yourself from to make your current reality a reality. And you probably trusted your gut. You probably knew what was right. And there was probably times when making those decisions were tough to do. And you probably had some tough conversations, and that doesn't go away. I mean, what's the, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, that's kind of a real thing. And if you have high aspirations and you really want to do something and you vision something greater for yourself that is currently what you have, I feel like people know, but most people don't act on what it is. Most people don't take that risk of having uncomfortable conversations. They just sink in and they just let it be what it is. And then what happens, right? This, like, you've probably seen this. It's like, I let this outside influence remove me from my dreams, and I relegate myself to doing something that I really don't feel is right thing for me to do. But I do it anyway, and I'm resentful and I'm unhappy, but I put on a happy face, right? And I try and slog it out and get through it and be just a sheep and and become this thing that everyone else is, even though I know that I'm a unique personality and I've got more to offer the world. And then what happens? At some point, when that diversion exits your life, whatever that is, what is then the first thing that happens? They go after this thing full on. Like, now this distraction is removed, right? And now I'm going after this thing that I always wanted to go after, that I didn't have the guts to remove back in the day. And now I would be years ahead of where I'm at now. But now I have retained the focus. And at some point, then it's kind of too late, and there's still that level of enthusiasm there. But, man, just to summarize this very long answer, to your question, if that if your gut tells you that there is a distraction hindering you from what it is that you think that you need to be doing, you have to have uncomfortable situations and conversations and extract that, and you got to move forward. And time moves fast, and you can always revisit that 10 years from now, whatever that is, that will, make you feel more encompassed as a human being. But if you've got a drive and you've got a vision, you gotta get after it. And that's just all there is to it. I don't see any successful people that didn't make extreme sacrifice and make hard decisions to get where they got. I don't know anyone that just kind of coasted into it and were being beat around and being distracted and ended up in this great place. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah. I think that the common denominator is also you have to be prepared to do things that other people aren't prepared to do.
That's right.
And a big one of those is, as you say, eliminating those distractions. I found that from my experience, whether it's having an uncomfortable conversation or missing out on something that other people are doing, it gets easier with practice. It really is a muscle. And I'm at the point now where I've definitely been distracted, like in many different ways. And it's something that you analyze, especially we're at the end of the year right now, as we're recording this. I think you do look back and go, maybe I didn't need to spend as much time doing that this year. Maybe I got a little bit sidetracked by that girl or whoever it might be. But I think in terms of now, especially romantically, like whoever enters my life, that threshold is so high for a girlfriend or a serious relationship of, they really would have to understand exactly where I'm going and be very supportive of that. And actually doing that and knowing what that truly means is very different from thinking that you would. Because, it's totally understandable why a lot of people want to be in a relationship with somebody that maybe has a more predictable path. But just coming back to more of like the band life and the music industry in general, I do want to talk about the links between style and music. I think they're probably two parts of our culture that are the most intrinsically linked. The genre of music that you've been involved with heavy metal has what would be an extreme image to a lot of people. And, having been in that kind of scene for such a long time, what have you noticed about the way that people perceive you, even let's just say at the grocery store, in normal society, being a more alternative looking person, and how has that changed over time? Like, have people become more accepting of more extreme visual images, would you say?
Image is really important to heavy metal, especially the origin of heavy metal and hard rock. Right, it was like a uniform. Like you couldn't have short hair and be in a heavy metal band. Like that was not a thing, right? Like that, there was maybe some circumstances over there, but but for the most part, there was a uniform, and that uniform has changed over time. I feel like the grunge era image kind of crept in and has kind of taken hold of that, internally as well. Sort of, it's kind of like a hybrid of things, right? Like where you have, the basic heavy metal band that's like t-shirts and camo shorts. And then you have the extreme image of, say, like Sleep Token and Ghost and Slipknot, right? Like those are image heavy bands, and it works in that context. Clearly, I mean, those are like three of the biggest bands of the genre, and they're very clearly image based, right? In all the right ways. But image is important. I'm not like a person that gets recognized like in the grocery store. I think that I do carry myself in a way, and with the tattoos and the beard and all that nonsense or whatever, that if I'm at the grocery store, that someone will be like, "Are you in a band?" Like that'll be the question that I get, like at an airport or at a grocery store or somewhere, kind of random. But that's kind of always been a thing. And and sometimes I choose to answer that question, and sometimes I just kind of divert the question and just be like, "Oh, like I'm in the entertainment business." But it's kind of wild now, like, right? There's like cops and firemen and doctors that look like me now. Like it's
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. Like if you'd walked into a grocery store in 1990 with tattoos and long hair and a leather jacket, would people look at you like,
oh yeah,
back then?
oh yeah, yeah. There was a stigma to the long hair and tattoo thing for sure. Back in the day, seemingly not all that terribly long ago, but like now it's like athletes are fully tattooed and long hair and right. Like these guys that like are making millions of dollars, playing sports. So it's like the stigma is kind of over, but like, yes, before it's like, you get the questions of like, oh, what did that hurt? Yes, it hurt. What are you going to do when you get old? Like meaning that the tattoos like won't age or they won't age well or something or whatever. And, but you don't get any of that anymore. Like there's no, I mean, I feel like if you're extreme and you have a tattooed face, people still will look at you and there'll be some judgment there, for sure. And I don't know if any of that is justified. And I would imagine that if you're a person that's going to tattoo your face, you're fully, confident in your own skin, and that's nothing that will, bother you or intimidate you in any way. But that being the extreme, for the most part, there's an image that I carry myself with that obviously identifies as someone, in a band or that type of thing. And that kind of emanates, but for the most part, I feel like I've sort of, society has kind of like made me less of an outstanding character now.
It's become absorbed, hasn't it?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
And my dad has an Iron Maiden tattoo like all over his leg, for example. And you go in a bank these days and people have tattoos on their hands. I think partly that's also because a lot of people of that generation grew up loving this music. They wanted to express it, and that what was a fringe part of society has just become normal society now. And you've also got so many different subgenres of life in the West that have tattoos, they have extreme clothing, they have body modifications. It's all kind of piled together where like a guy might be covered in tattoos because he loves Slayer or because he loves hip hop.
Or
what
they
do you
just
think
love
is,
it,
yeah.
or they just love
That's
it.
true,
right?
yeah.
Right? Like, blackout tattoos, or like people that tattoo their eyeballs. Like, these are things that I don't understand. And it's not like a genre specific thing. Like this is like, I'm into body modification, right?
That's true. Yeah.
It's like, there's no identity here other than this is my identity. Like I'm a body modification person, and that has nothing to do with what I'm into politically, religiously, musically, anything, and those are, that's a different breed of person.
I'm so fascinated by the link between music and style and fashion and people presenting themselves in more an extreme way and pushing the boundaries of what we perceive to be a person. We've had, David Bowie first wore a dress in 1970. People still get outraged by, Harry Styles or whoever doing that, but really it's not a new idea. We've had people pushing the boundaries of looking scary, Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie. People have been doing that for a long time. We have the hyper-feminine people, that was a thing, in the 80s. Now you see it with K-pop. I'm wondering what's left. Like, what boundaries are there left to push and explore visually for musicians or creative people? Like, what would actually be shocking these days?
Well, that's tough. it's I think it's really tough to invent something new. It's because it's all been done. I think if you look back at that, right, like Alice Cooper thought Kiss was ripping him off, and how long ago, what was that, right? So it's probably more about a matter of like a cyclical event of how can you reinvent something that was a decade ago for a new generation? Because you're never going to, outshock the most shocking, but you could be equally as shocking for a new generation, and it seems fresh and it seems new, and so that's potentially the opportunity. There is how can I reinterpret shock and then deliver it for a new generation from a younger artist, like how that absorbed into their artistic DNA and how they reinterpret it. So I believe that there's still opportunity out there for what it is. Will it be unique? No, because everything is always a reinterpretation of what has come before. But it's how you reinterpret it is what makes it unique.
That's true, and I think it's relevant to different cultures and different ages at different points in time. Like when I look at somebody, I don't really listen to his music, but somebody like Youngblood. To me, when I see him, I see a bit of Iggy Pop, I see a bit of Ozzy, I see a bit of Alice Cooper. But what he represents to the mostly young women that listen to him is very different to what those artists could represent to them, very different to what those artists represented to their fans back at that time as well.
That's a really good example. Yeah. I think that's definitely a good example of someone who, for someone like you and I, that has, kind of had music in our DNA at a very young age. We've kind of seen a lot, but to a younger generation of people, Youngblood represents this younger demographic, this younger generation. And even though to you and I, what he's doing isn't original, but he reinterpreted it. He has a reinterpretation of what influenced us, and he just has it for a young generation. So it feels fresh, even though it's not, you and I wouldn't consider it original, but you and I could also agree that like it does feel fresh and it's being accepted because it does have a younger person identifying this and a reinterpretation of this thing that he was influenced by, and so it feels new and exciting.
I think so, and he's also very clever in the way that he's used social media to have a very close relationship with his fans. For musicians today, and I know that you're involved in helping young artists, get record deals, get gigs and things like that, build their audience. Just how important is social media for these artists today?
Well, Youngblood is, there's going to eventually be a distinction of people that have grown up only knowing social media. So they grew up with the language of social media and the importance of quote unquote content and how algorithms work, right? Like these are all very confusing things to older artists, which I kind of primarily, work with. Not dinosaurs, but like, we didn't grow up with social media. We've had to adapt to social media. Whereas a younger generation of people, it's just their language, right? Like we've had to learn the language. They very, coherently speak the language. And so they're able to, be, proactive about how they see trends and how they react to trends. Whereas as an older generation, we're only reactive, right? We're like, an algorithm, what's that? And then you kind of gotta figure it out. But that's kind of the way I see it, is like social media clearly is important because that's where the people are. And if you want to communicate to fans and you want to build a fan base, and if whether it's acquiring new fans or sustaining existing ones, that's the platform to do it. And so it's indisputably of the single most important facet of marketing currently, for sure.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I like about it is the fact that before you had MTV, magazines, executives that were very much the gatekeepers of people's success. Whereas now it's very democratic. Like, people really vote with their attention who becomes popular and who becomes successful. But on the other hand, when people's taste is decided by algorithms and Spotify playlists, and AI is actually playing more of a role in how music is created, what do you think is the effect that's having on the actual originality of the music and how prepared people are as artists to push boundaries and do something new, something that maybe isn't algorithm friendly?
I just listened to a podcast. It's Rick Rubin's podcast, and Mike Cesario, the CEO of Liquid Death, was the guest. Who I know Mike very well. Rick I've never met, but case in point is that they were talking about this very thing, and Rick asked him, could Liquid Death have existed without social media? Like, in the non-social media era, could Liquid Death have existed as a brand, as a company? And Mike very confidently said, no, absolutely not. And he immediately tied it in to music and about this gatekeeping idea that you mentioned too. That's super spot on. In that he was saying that there's obviously pros and cons of the internet and social media, but one of the pros is the democratizing business, in that the way that Liquid Death came to be was they created a commercial for the product. For Liquid Death as a product, they created a commercial. They put that commercial on Facebook and YouTube, and the product didn't even exist yet. It was like a proof of concept. And that was how Liquid Death came to be. He's like, if I'm going to try and sell this to a manufacturer, distributor, etc., there has to be some sort of visible like ROI. And the only way to do that is to be able to test it. And so let's put the chum in the water and see if there's any bites. And there was, and then they obviously had to create a product because the demand was there. But he compared it to music and current day, and he's totally right in that just like Liquid Death, whereas years ago there was gatekeepers, and if you wanted to put out a record, someone had to make a decision to sign your band and invest time, energy, and money into putting out your record and marketing and advertising and all of that, right? Whereas now a band can do exactly what Liquid Death does. They can make music and put it on the internet. They can make a video and put it on the internet. And then the market decides, right? Like, if a video blows up, if a song blows up, if it's big on TikTok and converts over to Spotify, these are all things where the market makes the decision, and that has flipped within the industry, right? There really is no one listening to, like, the music business doesn't work in this way. Like, there's an A&R person that hears a band and thinks their music is so great and that the rest of the world needs to hear it. That's not how it works anymore, right? These independent bands are putting their music and their videos and their content on the internet. The market decides what is big. So now these internal conversations at record labels are, how many followers do they have? How many monthly listeners do they have? Like, as an independent artist, are they finding and resonating with an audience? And then, as big as a band can build their independent following, then justifies an investment from a record label, right? So it's way less about the music and it's way more about the following, which in some regards, I guess from a digital standpoint, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, you're reducing your risk. whenever, an investment, a risk is pretty big from a musical investment standpoint. So it kind of makes sense, but it also puts the advantage of that is that it puts the future in the hands of the artist. No longer do they have to rely on the record label, right? The record label to do everything. Also, too, it removes that sense of like, I need to feel validated. Like if I get a record deal, that means that someone thinks my music is as good as I think that it is. And I need that validation in some type of a deal. Whereas these smart independent artists are like, fuck that, fuck validation. Like if I think my music is good, then I'll put it out in the market and the market will tell me that it's good because I know that it is. And that's all there is to it. And sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the timing isn't right. Sometimes the music isn't as good. Sometimes people don't know how to find an audience or resonate with the right target audience, right? Like these are things that happen. But for the most part, the gatekeeping, as you mentioned, has been removed and has put the leverage in the hands of the artist, especially the smart ones that can get their music out there. And then they can make a decision if they want to have a business partnership with a label, management agency, whatever, right? And to help level them up. Or they could stay independent and maybe they develop some type of structural partnership to where we just rely on them for distribution, or manufacturing. Maybe they help us reach places that we can't get on our own. But really, at the end of the day, that an artist can do the exact same thing that a label does if you're smart, and you only really need to attach yourself to a label if you feel like there is a significant amount of connection and assets and resources that they have that will then help you level up, which are sometimes necessary, but yes, to summarize, your point is correct that gatekeepers have been removed and it is now in the hands of the artists themselves, which is exciting, and fascinating that we've been able to see this transition in our lifetime.
That's very true. And there's definitely pros and cons to it. It's interesting that it is applying to many different industries as well, not just music. I mean, Liquid Death is probably one of the best case studies of social media marketing, e-commerce that I think is going to be studied for a long time to come. As somebody who was involved in the marketing and that brand, what is it that they did that you think just tapped into something in people's imagination that made them want to buy this water instead of the water they've been buying for so long?
The interesting part of Liquid Death that people don't realize is that it's a health and wellness product. In that the mission was people need to drink more water. Water is healthy. Water is good for you. Soda is bad, right? I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But how do you get people to drink more water is the challenge. And if drinking more water makes the world, the country, the state, your home that you're living in a better place that makes you feel amazing, that makes everyone feel amazing, how do you, that's the challenge. How do you do that? So an internal mantra at Liquid Death is, we don't sell water, we sell cool. So meaning that we don't, this can, right, isn't what we're selling. When you crack open that can and it feels like you're cracking open a beer and you're drinking it, there is a sense of coolness that it makes a person feel. And if you feel cool, then you're going to do it more often, right? Challenge accepted. How do we get people to drink more water? We make them feel cool doing it. There's nothing exceptionally cool about Crystal Geyser or Fiji or Aquafina, right? Like it's just a means to an end. Like I'm thirsty and therefore this is here, and it's a crinkly plastic bottle with paper on it, and like it, you know what I mean? Like there's nothing cool about it. There's no brand association, right? There's no depth. It's not lifestyle. I mean, it's survivalism, but it's not lifestyle. So at its core, that was that. Then the bigger challenge is, how do you sustain that? How do you get people to come back? Like, how do you challenge, right? Like, I think this was one of the things that I kind of wanted to bring up to you from like a personal branding perspective of like, how do you build a personal brand? How do you build any brand? You have a contrarian point of view and you ruthlessly defend it. Right. And that's it. And I think Liquid Death is that thing where it was a contrarian point of view. We have water in a can in the most simplest of terms. And we defend it ruthlessly because our perspective is that it's hilarious. And so therefore all of the content should be hilarious, right? We want people to laugh. We want people to have fun with us because we feel that water in a beer can is a health message, yes, but funny in and of itself. And so I think like your personal brand, right? Like you have a contrarian point of view that you defend ruthlessly. And for anyone watching, that is in that position of how do I do this? Or like, people on your school channel or, or whatever, like to me, the very simplified version of all of this is very much that. What is it that you can do to kind of rise above, stand above? It wasn't like water was a market that needed to be penetrated, like it wasn't a thing that was necessary, and obviously the brand has grown into other styles of flavored sparkling water and iced tea and now energy drink and whatever, but all with a healthy perspective and all being marketed in a way to where it's engaging and fun to participate in, right? A fun way to engage with. And those were the things that differentiated and made it special and made people, want to be a part of it. One of my initial conversations with them, whenever I was meeting with them early on, was helping them realize that it was a lifestyle brand. And I don't know, and granted, I'm no genius. They would have figured it out on their own, but this was the thing that I kind of said kind of right out of the gate, is that comparatively to any other water company, this is a lifestyle brand and people are going to want to advertise that they're down with this brand, that they're in early, they're an early adopter, and they're going to want to identify with this product because it's great and it has a message, and I identify with this message and I want to amplify that message because I feel cool now and I want to let everybody know that I'm a cool person because I've made this decision, So, but inherently it's kind of fun to realize that what that is I'm making a good decision about my health. And that's kind of the reward in it all.
Absolutely. A final question for you is about how you see this current chapter and the next chapter of your life, what your plans are, what you're passionate about, and how you're going about sharing that with people.
I was watching your channel and I really kind of connected with what your message was. I really connected with your delivery. I like the fact that you were such a young individual with such a unique out of the box perspective. And that's why I was like, it's like, I want to reach out. Like you were offering, some type of communication there. And I was like, man, I really got to see what makes this dude tick. Cause it's very fascinating to me. And I'm glad that we were able to connect. And I think our journeys align in some ways to where it's like, your new newsletter, you were kind of, touching on an idea of how you propel this thing forward because I think you are realizing, or you've come to a realization that I can continue to do what I do over and over again. But at some point if I don't continue to reinvent, if I don't continue to push the boundaries of what I'm building here, then it's probably gonna level out at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And you at what, 27 years old, you're like, I'm too young to level out, to level out. So that's it's encouraging, you know, and it's inspiring for me to kind of watch you figure things out as you progress. And I'm fascinated, you know, by that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2026 brings and what you're leveling up and, is. But for me, I feel like it's the same kind of thing. Like I've reached plateaus in my life, and as, you know, an entrepreneurial type like yourself, it's like we're responsible for ourselves. And it kind of seems like if you get too complacent, it's a dangerous place to be. And there is really no level of comfort, right? Like, I don't know about you, but for me, I live in a very, low sleep, high stress level, which will probably not benefit my health in the long run. However, I don't want to be normal, and I don't want to do things that I don't want to do things that other people do. And I don't want to relegate myself to being average. And I don't want to answer to the man. I think at the end of the day, that's just it. And, I've had a fortunate run up until this point, but I don't want to take it for granted. I don't want to think like, oh, I'm just going to coast for the rest of the time, man. Like, I'm a young 56. And I feel like there's a continuous state of reinvention that needs to happen every couple of years, to where you're like, okay, maybe there's a plateau here that I'm feeling, and I need to put in some efforts to kind of see what else is out there. And, you know, the advantage is that with the internet, there's just so much more connectivity that happens, and there's so much deeper level of conversations that can be had. And there's so much more entrepreneurism that's happening as well, to where people like you and I can insert ourselves in those types of conversations, whether it's with someone wanting to do things like we do and educating them and helping them on their journey. That's one aspect of it. But the bigger side is the people that are above us, and how we can potentially collaborate with them, work with them, you know, be an asset to them from a generational standpoint, right? Like, I would think if there's just as an example, like if there's like a traditional menswear brand, like you and access to the people that you have would be a tremendous asset. And whether it's an advisory thing or whatever, like, I just feel like it can kind of work both ways, right? And to where you're at this very, you know, integral stage of where you're at your age and at the things that you've accomplished, to where you're an advantage to people that are above you and people that are below you, that are kind of wanting to have a similar journey, right? So it's very exciting. And then for me, it's kind of, it's the same thing. Like, I'm older, obviously, but, you know, the case in point is that I have a unique kind of skill set in that, I'm in music and I speak that language, and there's a whole new, there's a whole new, you know, advent of things like, you know, music tech, and, you know, music tech runs the business now, but sort of, you know, something that kind of constricts that is understanding how musicians work, understanding how the music business works, understanding the wants and needs and pain points of that. And, you know, kind of like where we're sort of aligned is, you know, people obviously want to understand the journey that I've taken and how that can be possible. But on a bigger scale, there's, you know, existing music tech that exists that needs help with interpretation. And then there's blossoming music tech that needs help in interpretation. So I'm excited about the future, because it's like it feels like there's constantly new doors and opportunities opening up. And it doesn't feel like that, even though like our paths are maybe sort of in tandem, but different. It feels like the opportunities for both of us are kind of abundant and exciting, right? Like I don't know about you, but I wake up every day with like, man, I don't know what today holds, but it's up to me to kind of explore and find out where the day can take me. Granted, I've got, your responsibilities in the day, but there's always a level of exploration that needs to be done. Right. So I think it's exciting, and we're living in an exciting time to where, like you said, I think at the top of this, it's like, man, I'm focused on looking at my laptop for a few months and kind of really building some stuff out of there. And man, like that opportunity will take you a multitude of different exciting adventures. And, I'm as excited as you are. So.
Well, I'm so grateful that we were able to connect. I mean, talking about what it's like backstage, when I mentioned to people that we were doing this podcast, and I explain who you are, I say, it blows my mind to think somebody could be on stage with Rob Zombie and then they come backstage. They're like, oh, James has a new video out. Like, to me, that seems so insane.
And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Look, man, let's wrap this one up. Thank you so much for making time today. Where should people go if they want to find out a bit more about you and follow your next steps?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. If Blasko official on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn kind of primarily is where my journey has taken me. So Mr. Blasko on LinkedIn, and
fantastic.
Yeah, and so those are my kind of main destinations.
Brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we'll get to do one of these again in person sometime.
That would be awesome. I would love that.
That would be cool. Yeah. Absolutely.